Dave, are we good?
Ready when you are.
Okay. You guys all ready? All right. I'd like to call the May 1st, 2017 meeting of the Transportation Commission to order. Our first order of business is approval of the April 3rd, 2017 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Second.
Am I reading this wrong on the heading?
The March 6th minute?
We have the
Well,
wrong
they should
minutes?
read April 3rd,
April.
shouldn't they?
April 3rd, but they're
Oh,
marked
okay.
8/6.
All right, so correcting the date on the minutes from March 6th to April 3rd. Are there any other revisions to the minutes? Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Hamby, seconded by Commissioner Storm to approve the April 3rd, 2017 meeting minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? All right. Meeting minutes are approved. The second order of business is to receive the recognition of the Walk-Friendly Silver designation for the city of Lawrence. Is there any presentation, or is it just acknowledgement?
Yeah, just acknowledgement. I was going to mention a couple of things regarding the program. This is a national program that is developed to encourage cities across the United States recommit and prioritize supporting safer walking environments. The Walk Friendly Communities program recognizes communities that are working to improve a wide range of conditions related to walking, including safety, mobility, access, and comfort. This is the first time the city has applied for the Walk Friendly Communities designation. They have different ranking systems. It's kind of similar to the Bicycle Friendly Communities designations: bronze, silver, gold, platinum. The city's been a bronze level in the bicycle friendly communities level for a while, and we received the silver designation based off this past application, which is, I think, pretty noteworthy. Lawrence is the only city in Kansas that has been recognized at any level, and that we've jumped up to the silver level. Jumped over the bronze was, I guess, a pleasant surprise. So there's, I think, 6 total sections that they rank communities on, and bronze, you're doing good in 1 to 2 sections. Silver is 3 to 4. Gold is 4 to 5, and platinum is all of them. And so we got some feedback in those different categories on how they've scored us. And I think that is attached to the agenda. The areas where it's walk friendly, there's really 3 different criteria in each category, or 3 different ratings, and they're not numerical. The highest rating is walk friendly, the second is on the right track, and the third is needs improvement. So in these 6 categories, we received the highest level of scoring in 3 of them, which is walk friendly, and those were status of walking, planning, and engineering. And then education, encouragement, and enforcement, we're on the right track. And then evaluation is one where we need improvement. So when they sent us a report card, they did note that they were impressed with some specific things in our application, and that was the interagency coordination on the safe routes to school, our thorough facility inventories and engineering practices, which include signal timing, looking at road diets, crosswalk design, countdown signals, and pedestrian hybrid beacons. the implementation of the Complete Streets policy and a demonstrated commitment to counting non-motorized modes of transportation. So those were some of the positive things that they pointed out. And they've also made some recommendations for improvement in these categories and some examples on their website of what other cities are doing to accomplish some of these goals. So I just wanted to kind of go over this briefly, recognize it, present the report card, and then down the road as we'll talk later about study sessions, but at some point in the future, this might be a good topic to revisit in the future, the application and maybe some points that we could look at improving. So I would also want to point out that the application was pretty extensive, and a lot of the work that was done by Arlene Horn in our sustainability department and the MPO as well. So there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time to put the application together, and all their work is appreciated. So with that, that's all I have. If there's any questions on the program, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
All right, thanks.
I'd probably chime in a little bit. How often will this occur, Dave? Is this like annual, every 3 years, 5 years? Do we know? That would be my first question.
Well, they actually will receive applications twice a year, so you could apply, more often than once a year. But I think the designation from what I saw lasts for 5 years, and after that you would need to renew it. So it would stand for 5 years, and you would need to renew. But I believe you can apply annually or more regularly going forward. But this is the first time we've done it. We'd have to follow up on some of the details, but that's my understanding. I had the same question.
Well, it would seem to me that it almost provides an action list. If you got down into the detail and really looked at the areas for improvement. And I think with an opportunity to document that and drill down into it and do something with it that would be substantial. And it would seem to me that we'd probably want to apply after we accomplished enough of those things to move forward with a different application.
Sure.
So I agree that, what you said about study sessions where we drill down into it and see a little bit more about what we're dealing with here. But I think it's a good opportunity for improvement.
Any other questions? Or is there anybody from the public that would like to comment on this item? All right. Well, thanks, Dave. I also wanted just to point out, before we move on, this application for the Walk-Friendly Communities recognition program was one of the recommendations made by the Pedestrian Bike Issues Task Force, and it was kind of acknowledged as the complement to the Bike Friendlies Community Program, which was also recommended by the task force as something the city should do regularly to measure progress. All right, the next thing on our agenda is to receive any general public comment. This is comments that are not related to anything on the agenda. Would any of our guests like to make a comment? Please come forward, introduce yourselves, and share
I'm
your
Bonnie
remarks.
Uffman. This is my first time here. However, I have been checking the agendas fairly regularly. And what I want to say tonight is that I am hoping to see some additional items on the agenda. I see a whole lot of traffic calming, and I'm totally for traffic calming. But I think that there are some additional questions that I would hope that this group would be addressing. And some of those would be looking at budget for bike ped projects. It would be good to have some input from this committee or commission. Another example in my mind would be sidewalk funding. That seems like that's something I would hope that this commission would address. I think that covers what I want to say. I'm glad that this commission is off and running, and I hope it will start running further and faster.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Good evening, Chairman Bryan and Commissioners. My name is Michael Allman with Sustainability Action Network. And honestly, Bonnie and I didn't collude on this, but I want to talk about the same thing. I mean, basically, you're a brand-new commission, as you know, and you may or may not know some of the background and history that I'd like you to consider. Last month, you began a conversation trying to come up with your identity, and I assume that the upcoming study session may have something to do with that. I encourage you to consider that. Exactly 3 years ago, May 2014, this discussion began with the City Commission at their budget session, weighing and balancing whether they wanted to ask or create or begin a permanent non-motorized transportation advisory board or a bicycle pedestrian task force. Well, the following year, they chose to initiate the task force that Charlie just mentioned, and with the instruction that the commission, once they have recommendations from the pedestrian bicycle task force, they will know what they would do with the $450,000 that they stuck in the budget, which that $450,000 is still there in the budget with no earmarks and no designation for how to spend it, because they were waiting on the task force report to prioritize all these projects that Bonnie referred to. So this year, there's a long list of projects, several bicycle pedestrian projects on there, as well as the lump sum $450,000. The task force recommended those priorities, but it remains to be determined how those priorities are then chosen. Is it simply the City Commission that, I mean, as it stands now, no city staff person brought forth any of those recommendations from the task force for this year's budget. None. So who is going to initiate those? Well, Sustainability Action kind of anticipated that, and we submitted 4 projects, fortunately, but they're not recommended for funding. So who is minding the store? Well, based on the history of what the commission indicated for 3 years and the task force report, it should be this body. This is the Transportation Commission. Last month, there were concerns we should have some institutional memory about the Traffic Safety Commission on the website. True. We should also have that same thing for the Bicycle Advisory Committee, because that's where you came from. You're not just, like Bonnie said, traffic calming. You're a Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, or Commission, really. So please take that into consideration when you're having your study session, whatever that may be, and determining who you are. I mean, this is not a body, unlike some of the ones that some of you have previously sat on, in which it already existed, you became a new member, you sat down, and agenda items were put in front of you. You're new, you have the opportunity to put those agenda items on your agenda. The chair does, and any of you can suggest them too. It's in your bylaws, so please consider doing that, and any of us in the community will offer any support we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Any other public comment? All right. The next item on our agenda is the traffic calming items, Carson Place and Campbell Drive.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Nick Voss with the Public Works Department. In June of 2016, the Traffic Safety Commission received a request for traffic calming on Carson Place between Campbell Drive and Eisenhower Drive, and on Campbell Drive between Campbell Place and Carson Place. The city's traffic calming policy permits traffic calming devices on local streets if the 85th percentile speed of traffic is 5 miles per hour or greater than the speed limit, if the 24-hour count is 1,000 or greater, and if cut-through traffic is more than 50% during the peak hour of the day. If any two of these criteria are met by 85%, it also qualifies. Both of these streets are local streets in a residential area paved approximately 26 feet wide. They both have a speed limit of 30 miles per hour, and they are both not included on the Safe Routes to School or the countywide bike map. There's sidewalk on one side of the street for each of these, and parking is not restricted on either side. Queens Road from 6th Street to the north city limits will also be reconstructed in the summer and fall of 2017. Traffic data was obtained for both of these streets in September of 2016 and found the 85th percentile for Carson Place to be 32.6 and for Campbell 31.3. The 24-hour two-way traffic volume for Carson Place was 96, and for Campbell it was 72. It is recommended that the Transportation Commission deny the request for traffic calming on Carson Place and Campbell Drive because it did not meet the criteria set forward in the city traffic calming policy.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the commission? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item? Okay. Dave, is it all right if we combine these two into a single motion? Okay. I'd entertain a motion to approve the staff recommendation to deny the request for traffic calming on Carson Place and Campbell Drive. Commissioner Hurt made the motion, seconded by Commissioner Schwartz. Is there any other discussion about the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is the no parking request at George Williams Way and Rock Chalk Drive.
Okay, so this is for no parking request on George Williams Way and Rock Chalk Drive. Each time the city or the University of Kansas hosts a major event at Rock Chalk Park or the Sports Pavilion, Lawrence City staff is tasked with placing temporary no parking signs along George Williams Way and Rock Chalk Drive to keep vehicles from parking along the access route to the event. Both roads are considered access points for emergency vehicles and buses. With vehicles parked on one or both sides of the road, access is not possible while maintaining two-way vehicle traffic. In addition, there when there is no major event at either facility, parking along these roadways is not needed. Staff is recommending that both roadways be designated as no parking on both sides of the road to allow two-way traffic, as well as maintaining emergency vehicle access to either facility. KU was contacted about this, and their only concern was that buses would still be allowed to shuttle people and drop people off at appropriate areas. And Parks and Rec was contacted and didn't have any comments to oppose this. It is recommended that the Transportation Commission approve the request for no parking on George Williams Way and on Rock Chalk Drive.
Yeah.
When there's not an event, nobody parks out there. When there is an event, parking on site does fill up. And I'm not sure if people park out there, but I know when they have an event, they place no parking signs along the roadways too.
Yeah, and we're getting ready to prepare for the Junior Olympics, and so there's a lot of planning going on. Mark Q and our department's helping out for Public Works, but there's a lot of discussions going on about where overflow parking will be for the event, and there's going to be a lot of parking and a lot of traffic challenges. So this was kind of what kind of brought the item up to get on the agenda and approved before that occurs in the end of July. So
So will the plan be to have a satellite parking and bus the people in that would normally park there?
well, I know for the Junior Olympics event, they're looking at adjacent land to accommodate temporary parking. You know, there's the paved parking lot at Rock Chalk Park, and there's an overflow grass area. But even when you have the big events like the relays, they're parking on the side streets, and I think even along Overland Drive as well. So for the larger events, they're going to need to come up with better ways to have parking. But in the future, there may be more parking lots out there in the area. But for the time being, yeah, it's a challenge.
What about 902 Road? Does it get any overflow parking at all? I think I've seen cars parked there.
Yeah, I think so, and a lot of buses stage on 902 Road. So, yeah, and that road's not in great condition either,
Right.
but yeah, that's not part of this request, but there may be no parking on one side of 902 Road now. I haven't looked at it, but
It's a very, as you know, very narrow road.
yeah.
So if anybody parks, I'm not sure you can even drive by it or drive on it.
Is it a county road?
It is in the city limits. Hasn't been improved to city street standards yet, because the area is still kind of undeveloped, the adjacent area. But yeah, it's just, it's a old chip and seal road and open ditch, so there's no curb and gutter, and, but yeah. It's in the city, so it's ours to maintain.
All right, is there any other comment or questions? Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this item? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to accept the staff recommendation to install no parking signs on both sides of George Williams Way from 6th Street North to Rock Chalk Parkway, and on both sides of Rock Chalk Drive from George Williams Way to East 902 Road.
So moved.
Is that Commissioner Ziegelmeyer? Ziegelmeyer?
Yes.
Is there a second? Yes. Who's my second? Thank you. All right, it's been moved by Commissioner Ziegelmeyer, seconded by Commissioner Hurt. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. No? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. The next item on our agenda is the speed limit request on Harvard Road between Crestline Drive and Centennial Drive.
In June of 2016, the Traffic Safety Commission received a request to establish a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit on Harvard Road from Centennial to Crestline. Speed limits may be altered if the existing speed limit is greater or less than what is reasonable or safe. However, if the speed limit lowering the speed limit does not guarantee that motorists will drive slower. The speed limits are set to reduce the crash risk, provide a reasonable basis for law enforcement, and to be accepted by a majority of road users. Speed limits are typically set according to the 85th percentile speed, which is the speed at which 85% of drivers drive at or below. Adjustments to the speed limit can be made for narrow roadway pavement widths, horizontal or vertical curves, driveways with restricted visibility, high driveway density, rural residential or developed areas, or narrow shoulder widths. Harvard Road from Centennial to Crestline is classified as a collector street in the residential area, paved approximately 23 feet wide, with a speed limit of 30 miles per hour. Harvard Road is identified as a safe route to school. It is not on a bus route, and it is identified on the bike route on the countywide bikeway study. Sidewalk is on one side of the street, and parking is not restricted on either side of the street. Traffic data obtained during September of 2016 found the 85th percentile speed of traffic to be approximately 33.3 miles per hour. It is recommended that the Transportation Commission deny the request for a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit based on the 85th percentile speed.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
30 miles an hour. What was that? I believe so. I'm not sure if they have any school or periods of time in the day where the speed limit's lowered.
What's the driveway density?
Just the amount of driveways.
Is it high there?
It's typical of Lawrence residential streets.
Well, just one comment. I don't personally think the speed limit would help. People are going to drive what they drive, like you all have said several times. I will say, though, that the sidewalk that's on the north side of Harvard from Crestline to Centennial is very narrow. I did drive it this afternoon, and I don't know what the density of kids walking on that street is, but if you can get two abreast, I'd be surprised. It's probably a single lane sidewalk, but I look at it and I don't see where there would be a lot of pedestrian traffic on that road, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just a comment, and that may be true in a lot of parts of town this age, in terms of how sidewalks are built. It is narrow. I think there's a grade issue too. I think there's actually some small retaining walls by that sidewalk, so it could be problematic, but that's just a comment.
Nick, is there any history of a traffic calming request on this instead of a speed limit change?
I'm not sure about this area, and I haven't looked back through, or I have looked back through a lot of the requests previously, and in this neighborhood, there has been a lot of requests because of the mix of students and residents that live there.
How about accidents?
I did not look up accident data for this intersection.
I mean, it seems hard to believe, I'm on that road about twice a week, but it seems hard to believe you could get much above 25 miles per hour, and but the 85th percentile speed is 33.2, was it?
Yes, 33.3.
That's crazy.
And it is on a safe route to school, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think I go about 20 there. There's usually cars on both sides of the road, but I think that's an interesting point because there, just beyond that is a pretty big student, KU student. I mean, there are a lot of dwellings there on the other side, so.
Is it just around grade schools where they have the, what I would call the school zone signs? Like, for instance, this is coming up to the middle school, so there wouldn't be school zones around that, is that?
Our school zone policy is currently being updated, and it will include middle schools as it's written now.
So that drops the speed limit down to 20 in school zones?
I believe when the policy is updated that we'll look at things on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. But will include middle schools?
Yes.
Okay. And also safe routes, are those part of the school zones, or how does that? How does the safe routes fit into, I mean, I understand what it's about. It's primary corridors for the, identified for students to get from area to the school. I mean, how does that fit into the school zone speed limit issue?
We do encourage students to walk along those routes, so from that standpoint, it would affect what you'd want the speed limit to be. We also talked with the schools as we were developing the routes on where their drop-off points and access points for kids are along the school. So the safe routes should be in the same area that the school zones are located.
Okay. Do you know what the time frame is for that school zone procedure, or is that gonna,
It's
is the
being-
intent for that to come to us,
It's currently being reviewed by the school
Staff?
district.
school district? So the staff prepared it?
Yeah, we've had an existing traffic control policy in school areas, and it's under review and revision, and we're going back and forth with the school district, so hope to bring that back and then to the city commission at some point. This is another one of those items that we've earmarked for possible future study session to go over what's all included in it. But I think the difference between the school zone is the designated area where we have the reduced speed limit, and there's some criteria based on that being adjacent to the school, and there's also some MUTCD guidelines on signage and use of the school zone traffic control, and then the safe routes to school is just the system-wide, the identified priority routes to get to school. So it's any number of routes that stretch out much beyond the immediate area of the school. So it's kind of the two different designations.
I personally don't see this as a speed limit issue, more of a pedestrian issue, and having a sufficient sidewalk for the, if this is designated as a safe route to school, that's more the issue than the speed limit to me. But the request is for speed limit reduction.
Yeah, that's kind of what I asked about the traffic calming, if there was any requests for that in the past.
That is one question I had. So on the request included email from July 11, 2016, has items 2 and 3, which both are in this up tonight. Was there a 1 in that email, or am I just, did Word get the best of them in formatting?
I am not sure.
Okay, I'm just asking the question.
Is Harvard and Crestline is the spot where there's a four-way stop, correct?
Correct.
Not that I'm a fan of that criteria, but wouldn't this fall in the traffic calming criteria? I mean, driveways, 100% of the driveways faces the road.
This is not a collector street?
I thought this was.
Is it? It is.
It is.
It is?
Yeah.
It's a collector.
It would fall on that criteria.
Yep.
Here we go again.
It is Collector Street. That's not the request.
Are there any other comments about the request for changing the speed limit? Okay. Are there any public comments on this item? Okay. If there's no other comments from the commission, I'd entertain a motion to approve the staff recommendation to deny the request for a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit on Harvard Road between Crestline Drive and Centennial Drive.
So moved.
It's been moved by Commissioner Storm and seconded by Commissioner Schwartz to affirm the staff recommendation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
Nay.
And any abstentions? Motion passes. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got my count right. 1, 2, 3, 4. 8 in favor, 1 opposed. With Commissioner Payton opposing it. All right, the next item on our agenda is the speed limit intersection ahead request on Castle Drive between Tam O'Shanter Drive and Clinton Parkway. Nick, before you start, can I just ask one question to Dave? On our recommendations to the city commission, if we don't have a unanimous agreement on the recommendation, how does that get passed to the city commission?
Good question, since we haven't had that before with this commission. I would anticipate it would still be a consent agenda item. In the past, under the Traffic Safety Commission, my understanding was when it was not unanimous, it was on the regular agenda. And so I'd need to get some direction from city manager's office about, on the agenda for these circumstances, but I think they're trying to reduce the number of regular agenda items, and that was another reason by the Transportation Commission to get some of the,
And from my memory, if
Comment, yeah.
somebody voted against or whatever, was that they would give a reason that would be included in what was forwarded to the city commission for the reason for their vote.
Do we need to have that tonight, or?
yeah, that's a good point. If that might be good to clarify the reason on the nay for the staff memo.
Commissioner Payton, do you mind?
Hold on. Yes. I want to make sure of one thing. That is, it is a safe route school, and it is also on the countywide bikeway. It says bikeway study, but I imagine that's in the plan. So it's on the safe routes school, and it's part of the countywide bikeway plan. And slower roads tend to be safer. I mean, I had some mixed feelings, like, for instance, it only covers one block. And so I can see that it doesn't really seem to make that big of an impact, especially because I think that's an area where people don't tend to speed through anyway, but I think you have to start somewhere. And next to school's not a bad place to start slowing down some of that traffic. We're trying. Maybe a change in speed limit's not the best approach. Maybe some sort of traffic calming is, but, so.
All right, thank you. right, Nick?
In June of 2016, the Traffic Safety Commission received a request to establish a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit on Castle Drive from Tam O'Shanter Drive to Clinton Parkway, and to install an intersection warning sign 1 block north of Augusta Drive. I'm going to start with this speed limit portion of this. Our speed limits are set at the 85th percentile. The Federal Highway Administration gives some reasons of why that should be changed. Castle Drive from Tam O'Shanter Drive to Clinton Parkway is classified as an arterial street in a residential and commercial area. This section of road is 4 lanes, 2 in each direction, with a median with a speed limit of 40 miles per hour. Castle Drive is not identified as a safe route to school and is not on a bus route. It is identified as a bike route on the county-wide bikeway study, and there is a continuous shared use path located on one side of the street. Traffic data collected on Castle Drive during August of 2016 found the 85th percentile of speed of traffic to be approximately 50.4 miles per hour. And for the other section, or the other portion of this request, was an intersection ahead warning sign. You know what I need to switch it.
Yeah.
So just so I'm clear, the current speed limit is,
Yeah,
the current speed limit is 40 miles an hour,
that's correct.
and the request is to drop that to 35?
Yes,
And the actual speed, 85th percentile, is 50?
yes.
Okay.
Over 50.
So here's an example of an intersection ahead sign. That's what they're requesting for this area. This is the area that it would need to be installed at. So the intersection ahead sign may be used in advance of an intersection to indicate the presence of an intersection and the possibility of turning or entering traffic. For this location, the sign, or for all locations, the sign will need to be placed 2 feet away from the curb. This would not provide any lateral separation between the sign and the shared use path. There were no reported crashes at the intersection of Castle Drive and Augusta Drive in 2016. The site distance from Augusta Drive to the north is 450 feet, and the site distance is basically the distance, if you're sitting in your car, that you'll be able to see the brake lights ahead of you. The stopping site distance for the current speed limit of 40 miles an hour is 305 feet, and the stopping site distance for the current 85th percentile is of 50 miles per hour is 425 feet. The stopping site distance takes into account 2.5 seconds of reaction time. So you see something in front of you, and then you react, and then the distance that it takes to stop in front of that.
That intersection right in, right after.
It is not. So it is recommended that the Transportation Commission deny the request for a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit based on the 85th percentile speed, and the request for the Transportation Commission to approve or deny the installation of the intersection ahead sign north of Augusta Drive for southbound traffic.
All right, thank you.
Oh, one more thing. We have had other roads along, or other signs along this section of roadway. Some of them, I believe there's a speed limit sign and some signs to indicate curb inlets. Those do occasionally get hit and do require maintenance. And I just wanted to let you guys know about that as well.
Is there enough room to get that sign in there between, I mean, I don't know, the exposed aggregate concrete and the path there and the sidewalk?
Yes, we would have to place it right on the line between the exposed aggregate and the regular concrete.
So Nick, since that 10-foot path requires a 2-foot clear zone, how do you intend to mark that or deal with that?
That's something that I'd research further. The existing signs do not have anything to mark along the sidewalk.
Right, but is the city accepting some liability if they put the signs up there within the clear zone of the 10-foot path?
Whenever,
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't want to say we're accepting liability with the clear zone. There's, the general design guidance is to have a 2-foot clear zone either side of a 10-foot path. We did go back and put in object marker signs next to the curb inlets. Even though the road is completely straight north-south through this area, the curb inlets with the tapers were confusing people, and they would drift off and hit those and shred a tire. So we went out and painted those and did put up object marker signs after the fact, and those would be within the 2-foot clear zone. So those aren't ideal. So I don't want to get into the liability question from the legal side, but those signs are a little narrower. They're narrower signs, but they do lean a little more. These the intersection ahead signs or the diagonal warning signs, and those would overhang the shared use path. And so yeah, we would have some challenges to put up a sign here. It would need to be sized differently, or it would need to overhang off the retaining wall of some sort to provide that clearance. So.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Is there any evidence that those intersection ahead signs really are paid attention to?
I haven't read it.
I would notice it.
I haven't read anything for or against it. Anything you can do to provide more information to the drivers is going to be a positive, but that is a good question of whether or not people see it.
Crossing, the guy who's gonna be in view. You're getting a place to set that sign off. So your sign's gonna be right there, right along the curb as the driver's looking towards the intersection, see if somebody's there.
We typically just install the intersection warning head signs and a speed limit warning if there's an issue with sight distance at an intersection. For instance, on Bob Billings Parkway, it's signed at 40 miles an hour, but there's some limited sight distance, so we put warning signs that say 30. Those aren't regulatory, they're just advisory signs. So, do people read them? Maybe, maybe not, but most people probably disregard them. But again, we typically don't do that for intersections that meet design guidelines.
So I know it's been said many times, and I think this is very true just based on what I drive on my street and on Clinton Parkway and not realize I'm driving, that setting a lower speed limit, if the road is engineered to not have people driving slower, and I think of all the places in Lawrence, that would be Castle and Clinton Parkway. That side particularly seems like it's pretty overbuilt. Is there a thought on that? Like, it seems very wide even for the amount of traffic it needs to carry. Is there anything to that? I mean, is that true? Is that real, or is that just my perception?
That's some of that's difficult to explain, I guess. A lot of the speeds that are out there are based off of the roadway condition and the amount of traffic. So the more traffic you have, and the lower the speeds, or the more lanes you have and the less traffic, the higher the speed. So some of that's kind of subjective.
Right.
Where we have stretches of Castle that are not in good condition, the speeds are a little
Right.
lower naturally because it's more challenging to drive through with the potholes. But yeah, so I think one of the reasons the speeds are higher is because it's a long, straight stretch of road with new pavement and not a lot of traffic volume for current traffic volume for 4 lanes. It's
Yeah,
right
but
on the border, so.
at that I mean, specifically at that end, it's not 4 lanes. I'm saying right at like Clinton Parkway, sort of where Tam O'Shanter comes in to Clinton Parkway. I feel like in a lot of, most of that is more like 6 lanes, which,
Well, are you talking about south of Augusta Drive to 22nd Street, where the road alignment jogs over a little? It is a little wider, and it's also wider because the median ends and there's a center turn lane, I believe, so the pavement's a little wider than 4 lanes or two lanes with a divided section. And with the shift in the alignment, I think it's a little wider to adjust for the speed and in the section to the south that wasn't improved yet from 22nd to 23rd. So, yeah, it's a wide section particularly through there. So, I misinterpreted your question, but it's still 2 lanes each direction, but the street is really wide.
There's a right turn lane as well.
yeah, I was
And
going
a
to
right
say
shifts off, so
there's a lot of
yeah,
pavement there.
It feels like 6 lanes,
Yeah.
maybe it's not 2 lanes each travel. Yeah, there's a lot of pavement, I guess is really what I'm getting at.
Any other questions or comments about this item?
It seems like, in addition to all this, this is a downhill stretch, and so putting in changing the speed limit is probably not going to change the fact that people are driving the speed limit and then increasing as they travel downhill. I do have, I can see the advantage of having an intersection sign there, but I can't see where you would put that without interfering with the shared use path. There are already places along there that I've experienced where you feel like you have to get out of the way of a sign, and unless it's attached to that retaining wall above the path. Or in the median, which wouldn't probably make sense either. You're not really going to be able to do that without interfering with pedestrian traffic.
I guess in my perspective, there hasn't been any accidents there in 2016. So not to say there isn't a small problem, but it's not evidencing itself in a larger problem that creates crashes. So that kind of makes my decision pretty easy on there.
I just think you might worsen visibility, putting a sign. I don't know if it's speed limit. I hate to see the police trying to pull people over there. And people coming downhill, and all of a sudden you've got somebody pulled over right there. Not particularly safe.
I mean, I can appreciate that a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit there or 35-mile-an-hour speeds there would be nice to have, especially if you're pulling off Tam O'Shanter. I just don't, it seems unlikely that lowering the speed limit and a intersection sign seems unlikely that that is going to do much to me.
From my perspective, I mean, the people are comfortable driving 50 miles per hour, lowering it to 35 isn't going to change their comfort level. I mean, this area road was designed to make people feel comfort driving at that speed. And, I mean, doing something to change their habits is, I mean, putting a sign out there ain't going to change their habits.
I agree with that.
I mean, a road diet or making the lanes smaller. Or,
I do
don't-
think, as the Transportation Commission, though, we aren't just here to look at the habits of cars, but the habits of, say,
Exactly.
a pedestrian walking across that crosswalk there.
I agree.
But I don't
mean,
think this is an easy.
I mean, I know the city's going through that right now north of Bob Billings Parkway and trying to figure out what that is. I mean, this is just 10 years ago.
Dave, when is this road going to be rebuilt? 20 more years?
This section?
Yeah.
That pavement's good.
Yeah, it's actually, yeah, it's already almost 10 years old and it's
Yeah.
still in good condition, so I won't
30
be
years.
around.
Okay.
I mean, Dave, from your perspective, I mean, I've heard that there's not a whole lot of traffic. Is this something that we can consider? I mean, we got a shared use path on the one side. I mean, adding bike lanes or something. I mean, I don't know. It's 4 lanes and plus you get, I would say you get down to Clinton Parkway, there's not enough lanes. Because that is level F, that intersection moving through there. But this road moving north of that, there's a lot of capacity there. I don't know. I don't know how you go undo what was done.
So, maybe just to get through this, while we're noting that there are many problems with the engineering of that road, the request was to drop the speed limit to 35 miles an hour and to install 1 warning sign. Maybe for tonight, we can just settle that, and I think we're going to probably recognize all over this city that there are problems with roads that are built to get cars through quickly. And that's going to be a challenge for others, so I'm not sure we're getting anywhere other than just
Spinning
stating the
wheels.
obvious. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just call a vote on this.
So motion to accept staff recommendation.
Second.
Yep. All right, it's been moved by Commissioner Hurt, seconded by Commissioner... Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't ask for a public comment. Thank you, Michael. Is there any public comment on this item? Yes. All right.
Gotta keep you honest, Charlie.
Hey, I appreciate it. I'm just trying to get this conversation settled, so.
First of all, I have some questions that I assume staff would have to answer. Who submitted this request in the first place?
Do you have that?
Dan and
Yeah,
Bird.
Dan Dannenberg.
Pardon?
Dan Dannenberg?
Okay. Is he a neighbor there, or just, I know he's a vocal advocate, but,
I think he
He must
uses,
walk on it.
he walks quite a bit all over
Okay.
town.
Yeah, I've seen him walking
Okay.
across that intersection.
I've seen him.
okay. I just wanted to get an idea of how well thought through this was. And is the request in 2 parts? Speed limit and the intersection warning sign? Or is it one package deal? In other words, can you consider them as 2 separate items and vote on them separately?
We could consider them as 2 separate items. They were in the same email.
You say what?
They were in the same email,
Right?
but they could be considered as separate items.
They could
With
be.
2 action.
Okay. Okay. Well, good. That's good to know. I mean, it seems like if you have concerns with the sign, don't let it, kill the speed limit request. And then for data gathering, where was the speed recorded? What part of that street? Several parts, or where was
Right at
the
that
speed?
water tower?
That's correct. It's at the water tower.
Where?
There's a picture on the agenda.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Question.
Okay, so basically at the water tower is what that's pointing to?
Yeah. About 500 feet south of Tam O'Shea.
Okay. And the area that we saw in that photograph with the retaining wall is in the proximity of Augusta Drive, quite a bit farther south,
That's correct.
right? Prior to where the steep drop-off Castle heading south. And what time of day is that gathered?
For 24 hours. So the speeds.
One day?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Snapshot. Basically a snapshot. What day of the week?
Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
You don't know which?
I'm not sure.
Tuesday's always slow. Anyway, I question the data. I mean, it's not a whole lot to go on, put it that way. I recommend dropping the speed limit to 35, first of all, and I'll tell you why. I drive that route several times a week, taking my son to school, coming from 6th Street, heading south on Castle, all the way to Clinton Parkway. And then some days, a return trip going north as well. The speed limit is 40 south of Bob Billings. That time of day, morning and evening, there's quite a bit of traffic, and it doesn't slow anybody down. I mean, some people do. I mean, I try to drive slow, but if you've been in heavy traffic and everybody wants to go fast and they're on your tail, there's not much you can do to slow down. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Anyway, people typically go 50, and I mean, that 50.4 is right, but there's quite a number, at least those times of day, doing 55 and maybe even more, especially when they go over that hill. And down that hill, that is 60 or more. And that intersection at the bottom of the hill, where there's two there, is what we're referring to, where the speed's going to be much higher than at that water tower. And I know they are because I travel it. Now that's, you know, anecdotal, but go out there sometime and try. So the concern at the bottom of the hill is two intersections, one at 22nd Street and one at 22nd Terrace, where there's a traffic signal for the Hy-V. And that signal changes on demand when somebody comes out. So it changes rapidly, frequently. So people coming down that hill at 50 or 60, whatever, going to be caught real short. So I think maybe that's what the person's thinking was. I don't know, but that's what I've experienced out there. Okay, that's on the south end. To the north end, north of Bob Billings, the speed limit is 35 miles an hour. Now granted, that section up to 6th Street is budgeted to be reconstructed. Nobody has indicated yet what the speed limit will be, but I suspect they'll want to go with 40. Whether that is true or not, the pattern of speeds south of Bob Billings is going to set the tone for the speeds north of Bob Billings. The street's going to be a brand new street. People are going to be used to going 40, 50, 55 south of there. They're going to want to do that north of there. And that section is going to have bicycle lanes with a 6-inch wide stripe as the only protection. So I think the decision here will impact what happens north of Bob Billings as well. It's, you know, I don't know if you can change the proposal itself, but I would suggest 35 miles an hour south of Bob Billings to Clinton Parkway. Make the whole street 35 miles an hour. It makes much more sense to me as a package. Make sure that it's 35 north of there when that time comes too. So those are my thoughts on why I think it's important, at least in this section, to set that tone, particularly how it impacts the rest of the street and how it impacts those intersections at the bottom of the hill. So, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Just make sure I understand your original comment about the data. Is it your concern that where the traffic speeds were monitored, that was too far away from where it goes to the hill?
Particularly, yes.
Okay, so you're
at the
thinking
bottom
that
of the hill.
that speed might be higher than 50?
At the bottom of the
What do you
hill,
think?
certainly.
Okay.
But
Is there, I don't know what the issues are when you're getting the traffic speeds. Is there a reason why it couldn't have been done on the hill, or is that just to be avoided because that's not good practice?
I wanted to pick the area that represented the corridor, or the largest portion of the corridor. It would have been better to get speeds at every drive, or at least on the hill and in another portion.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Michael? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Is there any other comment from the commission? I wasn't trying to cut our comments off, I just feel like we were kind of getting circular, so.
Well, I'm going to throw my thoughts out there. I think I've developed an attitude, and maybe it's not a, a healthy attitude, that changing a speed limit doesn't really change the usage significantly. People still are going to do what they can do. In my mind, putting a different sign up there is going to have a limited effect on the behavior of the traffic. It seems that, and this is a question for people with expertise, if that area were deemed to be unsafe, 50 mile per hour plus, even higher, would patrolling it and providing tickets for people change the behavior in the long run as maybe a more effective way? Because I'm sure there are people like Michael that, travel it consistently. And Michael's shaking his head, so he's probably got an answer to this, but I'm looking for some way to control what may be a problem other than what I think is ineffective in changing a speed limit by 5 miles per hour. So,
Yeah, to answer your question, the two most effective ways to control speed is the geometrics of the roadway through the design or through enforcement. I drive this stretch every day on my commute to work, sometimes multiple times, so I'm very aware of the speeds, and I experience the same as Michael every day, and you're going down the hill, and it's very likely faster than 50 miles an hour. Occasionally there is enforcement on the street because I see it, but it's not something that we have. Our police department doesn't have a traffic enforcement division that they do that all the time, so they try to enforce speeds on some of these corridors where they're speeding as they have the resources to do so. But that would be the most effective way on this street to lower the speeds, would be to have more regular enforcement.
There's one caveat, is what you're thinking. If you put that speed sign, if you drop the speed limit to 35 miles an hour, you're right, most people won't change. They'll be going 50 miles an hour because the road's that way. There will be a subset of people who will follow the letter of the law. So now you're going to have differential speed from 10 miles an hour to 15 miles an hour.
that's a good point, too.
That's where I'd be scared. Now I'm saying we're going to make that.
Well, maybe it's me, but, and this is another question for my education, Dave. When you're going south on Iowa from 9th Street, and the graphics that are in the road that direct you to I-70, to McDonald Drive, and, big old letters, big arrows. When I see that, I can't visualize around town where that's used, but that really gets my attention. And I believe I can't remember where, but there are some speed limits actually depicted in the streets somewhere in Lawrence, aren't there? But just a personal comment, that's going to get my attention probably quicker than a sign. So I don't know if that's a useful alternative to any of this stuff, but it works for me. It's just my 2 cents.
So, any other comment? I just want to give everybody a chance to say everything, but I also feel like we're just kind of in a rock and hard place. This road was not designed for 35 miles an hour, obviously. I think we have a lot to learn about how do we make sure that roads going forward are built to the speed that is appropriate for the neighborhood that they're part of. And maybe there's some other things we need to study during our study sessions about various approaches to calming traffic that are available to us. But the request was to lower the speed limit in a place that's already got 40 miles an hour and traffic is 50 miles an hour. I think I'm okay with separating these two votes if you guys want to do that. The first motion then would be to approve the staff recommendation to deny the request for a 35 mile an hour speed limit on Castle Drive between Tam O'Shanter Drive and Clinton Parkway. Anyone? All right, Commissioner Hurt, and do we have a second?
One second.
And seconded by Commissioner Hamby. Any other discussion on that motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. And any abstentions? All right, the motion passes 9-1 or 8-1?
8-1.
8-1. Commissioner Payton, can you give us your?
Can I change that and abstain?
Sure.
I can tell you why I abstain. I mean, I agree with that, but I had actually just recently read something about, they've always said that lowering speed limit doesn't change behavior necessarily, but I recently read, and I don't remember where, so I tried to find it, but that is not necessarily the case, and so that, it could make an impact to lower the speed limit. So without that further information,
So noted. As I said, I think there's a lot we need to learn and examine as we continue our work.
So just wanted to confirm that it
Abs-
was
eight.
8-0 and.
One abstention.
Okay.
Commissioner Payton abstained. All right, the next motion would be to approve the staff recommendation to deny the request for an intersection ahead sign on Castle Drive between Tam O'Shanter Drive and Clinton Parkway.
Actually,
Do I have a motion?
There wasn't a recommendation there, was it?
yeah, they actually left it. Gave us a choice. But I will move to deny.
Do we want to consider that motion?
I will move to deny the request.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, the motion is made by Commissioner Ziegelmeyer, seconded by Commissioner Storm, to deny the request to approve an intersection ahead sign on Castle Drive between Tom O'Shanter Drive and Clinton Parkway. Any other discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? All right, the motion passes. All right, thanks. Next up is a staff update on the 2016 and 2017 traffic calming projects.
Nick, zoom that thing in a little bit, there's a dial, zoom it in a little bit. It's on the bottom.
No, it's on the platform.
There you go, there you go. Thank you.
Okay, this is a staff update for the 2016-2017 traffic calming projects. Staff is proposing to use the 2016-2017 traffic calming funds on the construction of traffic calming at University Place and the speed humps and speed cushions along Trail Road and Osdale Road. The previously proposed 2017 projects will be proposed for 2018 construction with 2018 traffic calming funding. The list that I put up on the Elmo is the 2018 list. The reason for the overruns is we were designing the traffic calming circles at the University Place neighborhood. The original intent was to push the curb back and fill in the pavement to the existing. As we started design, we realized that that would not be a good option for that area, and the intersections are being rebuilt. And as we were rebuilding the intersections, we pushed the storm sewer out of the curve and into the straight section of curb. If you guys have any questions or want more information on anything, I can provide it.
So does that make the storm sewer project, is that then funded by the traffic calming?
The storm sewer portion of that will be funded by the, it's funded through a stormwater account.
Stormwater utility. When we presented the 2017 traffic calming projects, we had not yet bid out the 2016 group, and based off those bids and the final design, which were a little higher than our preliminary cost estimate, we don't typically budget each project because we don't know what all devices are going to be installed when funds are available. We underestimated some of the costs, but are still recommending sticking to the order of our traffic calming ranking and doing the top projects with a combination of the 16 and 17 funds. Then we will bring back the 2018 recommended projects here later, probably in the fall, back to this group, and then design and construct them next year. And so I think we would prioritize these exact same ones next year, if all other things don't change.
Okay, so what I'm looking at there is 17 moving to 18.
Those were the,
Or 18.
those would now be the 18 projects. They would not be funded this year. They would be pushed into a future year.
But they were 17.
They were,
Okay.
yeah. And the, this recommendation, we put this on the agenda here, but this already, this will go to the city commission tomorrow night to approve the bids, and that's tied into this recommendation to use the funds for those 2 years. But just wanted to let everyone here on this panel, on this board, hear that too, because this was one of the first things that we brought to you, I think, in probably February or March. So.
Okay. Any other discussion or comments or questions?
David, I do have a question. I don't know that it really matters, but under the executive summary, you indicate that they have to be designated as main traffic ways. How does that fit into the terms we use?
Yeah, that's one of the technicalities of issuing debt for a project, is that that section of roadway needs to be classified as a main traffic way or main thoroughfare. So that designation gets made for the resolution to issue the debt. So that's the standard language that needs to be included to
Would that
issue.
be like a collector and arterial, or
It can be any class.
could be a local
It
street?
can be a local street.
So you just have to call them main traffic ways in order to do the debt?
Yep,
Okay.
correct.
All right, any other questions? All right, then, there's really nothing on this one that we need to make a motion on, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the study session, discussion and scheduling.
So in our last meeting, we talked about the idea of having study sessions. After that meeting, we met, I think that the direction was for Steve to meet with staff, and Charlie joined in as well, and we kind of discussed a plan or threw out some ideas for holding a monthly study session and what day and what different topics. And as you know, I sent everyone out an email on a couple of options, and it seemed like everyone was fine with either option, starting this Monday meeting earlier or hosting a noon meeting some other time in the month. So and I know there's preferences both ways, but it sounded like from everyone's responses that a mid-month meeting at noon would work as long as it was consistent every month at the same time. And certainly we would understand if from time to time you were unable to attend. So we looked at, as far as the schedule goes, we looked at the availability of the commission room. Not every meeting would have to be in here for the mid-month meeting, but most could be. So it looked like Thursdays at noon on the second Thursday of the month was open every month. And so with that being said, I think this is a good idea to have a separate meeting, a little more informal, no action items, to discuss a lot of these topics that come up regarding the policies, manuals, budget, schedules throughout, as we're looking for, looking already, we're already getting through the 2018 budget calendar now at the city commission level. So at the city commission level, so here, before too long, we got to start thinking about 2019, which would be later this year, to start thinking about those things as we go into the next calendar year. So we discussed staff and Commissioner Evans and Brian about maybe at this first meeting, which would be May the 11th, would be the first mid-month meeting, to have it's kind of maybe a round table with everyone to get feedback on what your experience, expertise, priorities, education, background, ideas on what you would prioritize or want to know more about, rather than us just picking topics and setting an agenda. So we have a list of ideas already. I know budget and the CIP process is something that's come up. The priorities of the bike ped task force and the way the monies will be allocated. I know some items like the sidewalk maintenance issue is already been up to the city commission level, and a lot of it has to do with budget and funding. And so I don't know unless something gets referred back to this group, if that's something that at this time it would be a priority. But the safe routes to school process and the policy and the maps is another idea. The school area traffic control policy, discussion of the MUTCD and what it's used for, maybe even a bike ride to see the different bicycle facility types, a shared use path versus a bike lane versus a buffered bike lane. So there's a lot of different ideas out there, but I think what we would like to do is to hold that first meeting May the 11th, and then we would have subsequent mid-month meetings every month on the second Thursdays of the month, and we would help develop a calendar based off of probably after that first meeting, getting ideas out there, and we can discuss the best time of year to present some of these topics as well, and try to sort things out. There's all kinds of different topics we can discuss, but I think we'd like to get any additional feedback from the group on the time and the day, and then our schedule. I had anticipated starting the meeting at noon and wrapping up by 1:30 at the latest. We would be able to accommodate lunch for these meetings. These meetings would also be open to the public. There wouldn't be any action items, like I mentioned. They wouldn't be video recorded necessarily, and probably a little more informal. Maybe at this first meeting would also be good way to get to know everyone, because everyone comes from different backgrounds and areas, and not everyone knows everyone completely at this point. So with it being a new body and a lot of questions on how things are being brought up, and there's a lot of stuff. So staff is getting used to all of the things that are incorporated under this commission, and I know you guys are as well. And so this is kind of a way to assist some of the education portion to have these mid-month meetings. So with that, I think I'll just turn it over for any questions, and then I guess seek a motion to approve that date every month, and then we'll help you develop a calendar for the future to publish online, and so we have something out there to see what's coming up.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Dave?
Dave, I'd just comment that I really like the informal aspect of it and understand it needs to be a public meeting. That's fine. I would personally prefer to have a table that we can sit around. Seems a little more informal than around
Right.
the desk up here to me. And I think that's what we're shooting for, is just a little more informal and relaxing discussion about whatever we choose. I think, I didn't make notes of your list, but I think it'd be great if you could put a real simple list together for us. So maybe before May 11th, we could look at that and see how that may align with priorities, what we should be looking at sooner rather than later. So those are my comments. I think it's a good idea.
Anyone else? Okay, great. Well, anyone want to make a motion to approve the second Thursdays at noon as our study session schedule?
So moved.
Is that Commissioner Severin?
Yes.
And a second from
I'll second.
Commissioner Hamby. Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion to accept the second Thursdays at noon as our study session schedule, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Great. Look forward to seeing everybody then. The next item on our agenda is commission items. This is on here to allow any commissioner to bring up an issue they'd like to have discussion on, or the request staff to do any work on. Anyone have any commission items today? Commissioner Storm.
Just real quick, we were kind of talking about and this is just from my experience on the Traffic Safety Commission meeting, but we were talking about if there's a dissenting vote like that and how it goes forward. I think we could talk about maybe that at future study session, how we want to handle that. There's also another issue. Michael Allman kind of said, well, why don't you go south with reducing the speed? From the Traffic Safety Commission days, and I know we're not the Traffic Safety Commission, we couldn't expand a request, but we could reduce it, because by expanding it, you change the notification area. So just want to make sure we're all on the same sheet of music on that, about expanding requests.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other
That kind of, sorry, that kind of goes along with the question I think that I had was, 3 times tonight we voted on things that were a yes/no vote, but maybe weren't really yes/no issues, just because of the way that the recommendation is written. What is our role or the potential for this commission to say, no, we deny this, but this is an area that needs to be studied,
Yeah.
so that, it's not necessarily that we agree with what's
The
being
recommendation.
recommended,
Right.
but we feel like something else needs to be recommended.
Right, like where traffic calming is more appropriate.
Right. I don't know if that's a question for you, Dave, or who,
Yeah, it would just be
how
to
we
direct-
address that.
Just be to direct staff to get more data, look at other options. Some of these items that get, some of the things that will be on the agenda are things that we bring that are projects being developed. But other ones that are citizen requests, we want to respect the request and answer the request or give a staff recommendation. And if we feel there's something else that should be brought up, we'll try to do that, identify those issues. But if not, if there's other ideas or thoughts about expanding the area of speed limits or changing the lane configuration, we would need to get some direction on. If the direction's to provide data, then we would just need that feedback at this meeting. And you could do that with the agenda item if the majority agree, or bring it up at this point here during the commission items if there's any question or issue anywhere.
Well, I think you're both raising an interesting point about, what's our business? Is it to be the body that hears the citizen requests and makes a determination on that? Or, do we have a purpose that's broader than that? And that's a good topic for discussion maybe at our May meeting. I know in the Ped Bike Task Force, a lot of the discussion about what makes a committee effective is sort of getting to both of your comments. The committee is effective if it is responsive to the public, but also can be proactive and identify kind of a work plan and try to build the kind of community, the transportation network that we know is best for the community. So that's more of a two-way street where you're here as a hearing body, but you're also able to articulate a vision for the community and kind of be proactive in that sense. And I think at this point, we're 3 months into it, and we haven't had that opportunity to think about how do we craft kind of a annual work plan, if you will, or even a longer-term vision for creating a truly supportive environment for people that want to walk, bike, take a bus, or drive, or use a truck to get through town. So I think that's a great discussion for us when we get together in May. Are there any other comments?
I'll just jump on that quickly. I think that's a great discussion, and I really agree with your comments. I think that the value that we provide the commission is more in the broader discussion and not the yes/no. I think, we put Aaron on the spot a couple of times, and, I think maybe we all ought to be on the spot to provide, I'm not saying everybody has to have an opinion on everything, but I think broadly, providing them with more than a yes/no is to their benefit. And, because at the end of the day, we're not governing, they are. And they're really the yes/nos that matter, I think, at the end of the day. So I think the ability to record the discussion, Dave, in a synopsis that the commissioners can look at, say, oh, well, there's 4 or 5 points that are quick to look at and to evaluate something, would be a pretty high value for them.
So I want to add a couple things, just addressing something he said. I mean, tonight, when those questions are brought, my inclination is to vote with everybody, the same. But it's difficult because it's like then voting the same, it almost feels like you're saying nothing needs to be done there, which isn't necessarily the case either. And so that's part of why I voted against, even though I understand what the complications are, even though I understand why you wouldn't reduce the speed. So another thing I wanted to talk about, just because Bonnie and Michael came, and I drafted an email earlier, and I want to read it. I know some of this might have changed, or I might have been more addressed tonight, but and maybe be valuable to wait till next week, but I'll just read it right now. So, during the Pedestrian Bicycle Issues Task Force, I had serious reservations about doing away with the Bicycle Advisory Committee. My main concern was the Transportation Commission would become an iteration of the Traffic Safety Commission, largely focusing on automobile transportation. At this point, my concerns seem somewhat justified. I look forward to the Transportation Commission moving toward the more holistic transportation approach I'd hoped it would become. Many people have spent a lot of time working to make the Lawrence transportation system more diverse. Will the Transportation Commission examine the sidewalk policy? Will we have the opportunity to make recommendations on bike ped projects for the CIP, such as the loop, trails, bike boulevards, and protected bike lanes? Or will we, like the Traffic Safety Commission, only be recommending how to slow down traffic on sometimes overly engineered streets? While we as a city do have a great need for some traffic calming, we also need to really start considering building infrastructure for other modes of transportation. I recognize much of this is out of our control, but I was hoping you might be able to let me know how the bike ped and transit will fit more into the commission in coming months. Are we simply waiting for budgets and sidewalk policy to better establish what is possible?
Were you addressing that to the whole commission? Or?
Yes and no. I was addressing it to city staff and commission, so. These are just thoughts I had today, and I think are very important because I really, after being on that task force, I really felt like, I mean, we're just getting started. So it's not like there's we're just getting started, and I recognize there's all kinds of budget things that have to occur before we can do a lot of things, but I also think that that's really what this was meant to be, or at least that was what I got out of it, so.
Well, I think you're not alone in the thinking that the agendas so far have seemed very similar to the Traffic Safety Commission's. I've heard that from others. We received some correspondence, Dave and I did, from Marilyn Hall, the chair of the Ped Bike Task Force. She wasn't speaking as broadly as you were, but she did speak to the question about the funding for bike ped improvements. And, you know, it does seem like maybe the next agenda needs to have some weight given to bike ped discussion items, if not action items, in order to kind of get there. So.
Yeah, all I would mention on some of the projects and the budget and the funding is that the one challenge and the question that I have just as well as on the funding is the priorities and the sidewalk maintenance. And if the city's going to take over its share of sidewalk maintenance and that proceeds next year or this year, how much of that do we spend on sidewalk ramps, or do we do the gaps and stuff? So some of that's still out there, and I don't have the answers to that, and it comes down to the funding. So that sidewalk maintenance piece is still out there. I mean, just to be honest, I know I was talking with Chuck Souls, our Public Works Director, about that today too, because we've had that question from other people, and we have the priorities from the task force and even some budget scenarios, and those projects would be the ones that we would prioritize in a recommendation. So we do foresee that coming here shortly, hopefully after the
So you
the
foresee
budget
the
discussion-
policy coming to us?
The project recommendations that say that we
Okay.
have $450,000 to spend. These are the projects we'd like to, we would recommend to fund, and that would come to this group, or we would have a study session meeting and get input on what those projects are and work together. But those will certainly, this group will certainly be involved in the decision-making for projects for Bike Ped, for those dollars. So I know we've had 3 or 4 meetings and everyone's anxious to get going, but we're still getting caught up, and we're still, like I mentioned earlier, right now we got the proposed CIP in the budget coming up here with the City Commission for 2018. So as far as the dollar amounts, some of the decisions or discussions amongst this group should be focused on the next round, 2019. So that we need to start having those conversations this fall, September, October, for that, for the next round. So, that's, I guess all I have to add at this point.
I know the 450,000 for bike ped projects has come up a few times. And that has, excuse me, that hasn't been designated, or projects haven't been identified for that for 2017?
Correct.
So, which seems like something that this board could participate in some way, so that those funds are being spent in a way that reflects what the Bike Ped Task Force recommended. As opposed to, if we just keep pushing that down into the next year, when are those decisions made and who makes those decisions?
The City Commission will ultimately make the decision on the projects, but we'd like to present the proposed projects here in the next month or two to this group, and then with approval here, take it to the City Commission. So, yeah, we are a little behind. Yeah.
Okay.
The point taken. We've got a lot of emails and questions, and so there's some unanswered questions on that. So we will get that to you soon.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Are there any other items? I have just 2 things I wanted to point out. May is National Bike Month, and the City of Lawrence will proclaim such tomorrow at the City Commission meeting. The Compton is doing that tonight. Eudora proclaimed National Bike Month last week, and the county will proclaim it on Wednesday. So all the municipalities in the county are all going to do that. That was previously something that the Bicycle Advisory Committee spearheaded, and with the support of the MPO staff. And this year, the Health Department accepted that responsibility. I'm not sure if that's permanently where it's going to be, but it was easy enough to take it on. They basically handed us all the documentation, and we just had to call and schedule and everything. So I wanted to point that out. Another related activity to the Bike Month is this is also the beginning of the National Bike Challenge, which is a 5-month challenge for people to ride and log their miles. Last year was the first year the City of Lawrence participated, and we ended up ranked 17th nationally. Commissioner Hamby was one of the top riders in the state of Kansas. We had a couple others that were kind of highly ranked. So we have some pretty serious riders in Lawrence, and that National Bike Challenge gives them some recognition for that effort. The second thing I wanted to point out, the Health Department is sponsoring a Complete Streets workshop on June 20th, and all of you are invited to that. I haven't sent out the, save the date, but I think I had sent out a initial email that kind of acknowledged that that was one of the dates that was an option. I don't recall if I sent out confirmation that that would in fact be the date, but just in case I had not, I wanted to let you all know. It's June 20th. It'll be at the Carnegie Building, and the workshop will be from 8:30 to 3 o'clock. And then the night before, on the 19th, there will be a public meeting, public presentation at the library in the auditorium. And that'll be just an evening introduction to Complete Streets that'll be open to the public for anyone that wants to kind of understand more what Complete Streets policies are intended for. As you know, the City of Lawrence has a Complete Streets policy, but we're bringing in the National Coalition, the Complete Streets National Coalition, to do the training with kind of the intent of exploring the existing policy and setting the stage for how we might consider improving on the policy. It was adopted about 5 years ago, and a lot has changed since then, including this commission. So it seems like an appropriate time to consider revising it. So I hope you all can make it. Anybody else have anything? All right. Our calendar item, only thing we have is our next meeting is June 5th. I'll just insert that May 11th is what we just approved as our next study session, or our first study session. Nothing else? I'll take a motion to adjourn. Anyone?
I need to
Commissioner?
adjourn.
All right. Moved by Commissioner Evans, seconded by Commissioner Hamby to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? All right, so adjourned. Thank you, guys.